Hello there, be welcome to another MDJ video, another daily journal. I'm here to talk about something that I've been talking in the last video about my opinion in what art is. I do not want to keep talking about specifically what art is, but now I want to try to create some reasoning in the topic. Is the art defined by the author of it, or is the art defined by the characteristics that it composes it, or even if it is defined by someone who appreciates it? That's a very important question, isn't it? Well, I think that we can't say if someone's create something, like if someone's put real effort to create something, and with this creation he or she is trying to represent an idea or a feeling, something that is not normally represented and normally within the boards of that specific physical creation, we can ensure that this thing is art. Because, like, if someone's, for example, here I have three paints, three paints. Oh, how did I forget? Three paints of mine. I've painted them, and it's obviously a type of art. I'm not trying to say that it's a good art because it isn't realistically, um, but it is a type of art. I've tried to represent something through this paintings, and I try to put my effort into paint those. I tried to paint like with some physical materials, but the most important point is that I tried to use those materials properly. Um, if that's the case, I think that everyone would agree that it's very clear that this is art. I'm not saying that it will be necessarily a good art or beautiful art, but it will be on art for sure. Um, Probably everyone would agree in this topic. So we look to sculptures, for example. Let's say Michelangelo sculptures. Everyone does agree that those sculptures are art. They are art. Or any sculpture that I try to create and I really put effort and there is some representation in it, it will be art, right? For those things which is clear, the art, like it was clear that the person wants to represent something to through that art and represent something maybe to someone. That is clear. So that's clearly art, but the problem arrives when we get to those points in which we have art that aren't that clear if they are art or not. For example, there is some modern art, abstract art, that we can't say that easily they categorize it as art. And for example, which is the border of it? Can I say, for example, that this pen is a work of art or no? Can I say that anything that I do with this pen is a work of art or no? That's the question. That's the problem, right? Um, and I will put here another scenario which is even more tricky. Imagine if someone wants to create something that is not art. Let's say that someone just wants to create a useful thing. For example, um, let's say he or she wants to create um, a notebook. Here I have a notebook, for example, and you can see here that we have some type of art because it is made with representation of something. Here we can have we can see the representation of some elephants. I bought this notebook look, in Thailand. Sorry. Um, so, but if someone wants to create a notebook that it isn't art and it's made only with the purpose of being a notebook, an useful notebook, it will that be art or no? And that's the problem. Um, we can say and we can see that there is a difference between art and some types of artisanate. Artisanate. I don't know if that's a proper English word, but anyways, that's the first one is the one that we create to represent something, and the second one we could create to represent something, but we don't necessarily need to create to represent something. For example, there is some clothes that aren't created for representation of something else, are just created for the own sake to be like the sake of being clothed. My video got interrupted, but then what I was talking is there is those things, right? Those manual works that they are created with the only purpose to be useful um, for some specific type of use, and that's quite clear. But then there is a problem because we the representation becomes something quite subjective, and art becomes quite subjective. But the art cannot be subjective. It must be a concept that englobes all the types of art for all the persons. And obviously, it can be persons who say that something is art or someone is making art, and the person that are saying this is not right at all. That's a possibility for sure. But then, if the art is just decided by the author intentions, we will be guided to a place in which we have two problems. The first one is, what about the artists that don't want to create art? For example, is it possible to someone create art without without willing to create art? Or, and the second problem is, if we can, sorry, I got interrupted again. It was quite noisy here. But coming back to the what I was saying, we have two problems. The second one is, what about the things that the artists make trying to create art, but the point is that isn't art, that isn't proper art. Is that possible? Is it possible that someone who wants to create art deliberately don't create art? Is it possible? And well, that seems to be possible. You can fail into do some action. For example, let's say that someone's going to create a pen. Again, our same example. And it is possible that the person fails into the objective. The person can just go there, try to create a pen, and fails miserably. That's a possibility. The same thing for every object out there. And if we define art as having two parts, the first part being the physical one, and the second part being the representative one, um, is it possible to someone willing to create a physical aspect of art and fail miserably trying to do so? I'm saying fail miserably, but you guys understand what I say. Just fail. Um, is it possible to someone create art, try to create art and fails in it? If we say that's possible, so then art doesn't is totally related to the author intentions. Could be related to some degree, but not completely. And the if we say that it isn't possible, then we can say that nobody can fail to create art, and that everybody that wants to create art could create it. And we could also go to the first problem that I mentioned and look to through two possibilities. If we say that yes, someone that wants to create, like someone that doesn't want to create art, and like could accidentally create something that is art, if that's possible, then the art is not um, fully determined by the author intentions as well. And if it isn't like if it isn't not possible, if it is not impo- if it is not possible, like if it isn't possible, we must say that you just can't create art if you're willing to create art. Those two questions for me seems fundamental. Can an author create art without wanting create it, or can an author create don't create an art willing to create them? To be honest, I don't have the answers to those questions quite yet. I don't feel that I can argue properly about those aspects because it seems quite tricky. For some degree, I think that the art is not fully determined by the author intentions. I do think that if someone wants to create art, he or she can fail in the objective. As well, if someone doesn't want to create art, it can actually create it. Who knows? If let's say, for example, that the give an example of the cavemans, it is discussed still today whether the cavemans wanted to create art with the representation in the caves. That's a thing that's being discussed yet today, as far as I'm aware. Um, some argue that they didn't want to create art at all. They just want to represent something with some objective. But then again, they they don't have the idea of art, but they want to represent something. So we can say that they have the will to create art, even though they didn't know what art is, or they didn't know what art could be. Because we know what art is, and some people create art intentionally nowadays. That's a thing that we must say. People create art thinking about creation of art. It's like the human ability of think that we think. So we are like in a meta thinking, a meta reasoning, in which we can say a lot of stuff and think about different perspectives. Well, I really enjoyed the discussion. Um, I don't know if I could possibly um, keep arguing in that sense, because for me it is quite obscure. It's still whether we can create an art without want to create it, or whether we can't create we can't create art willing to do so. But the question is the question that I leave to you guys, and I leave for my personal reflection, is whether someone can create art willing to or don't willing to, or someone can't create art willing to create or don't willing to create. You guys understand what I'm talking about, don't you? um that's the point. See you guys later. Bye.